everyone. Welcome in to Two Countries, Two Americas, All Sports. I'm Matt Kill, live as always from Chattanooga, Tennessee, United States, and this episode is dedicated to the great folks of my hometown. Joining me from Americana, Sao Paulo, Brazil, is the birthday boy himself, Gus Tomazelli, and from Greenfield, Indiana, is Jason Wyrick. Guys, how are we doing tonight?
I'm doing good. My 32nd birthday. I'm really glad to spend the end of my birthday with my two best friends from United States of America, talking sports. There's nothing better than that. And, just happy to be with you guys.
Gus, happy birthday. It's been a long day for me. It's been a long couple of weeks, but with everything going on, there's no place I'd rather be than talking with my best friends in the world too about sports, and we're I got to take a victory lap too over your previous guest, Gus.
Yeah.
You got to get right here.
Yep.
To get
Yeah. He is busy tonight. He is calling the Atlanta United game. Otherwise, I would invite him.
It's a shame. It's a shame Indy 11's not playing tonight. Also.
Yeah.
Oh boy, yeah. Let's get right into it here because Jason's Chelsea are the club world champions, the world champions, defeating PSG in the finals 3-0, and that was on top of defeating Fluminense, the last Brazilian club standing in the semis. So let's start with you, Jason. Just kind of take us through like how Chelsea was able to pull off this championship, especially when they were such underdogs, according to the odds makers in the final.
Well, first and foremost, it's the history of the Chelsea. For those who don't know, Chelsea only wins knockout trophies when they are underdogs. 2012 beating Bayern Munich in the Champions League final on penalties. 2021 facing the treble winners, Manchester City, and beating them in the Champions League final. And then just going into this one against PSG, who had kicked ass and taken names basically the entire season. They rolled through the French league. They rolled through the Champions League. They won the Champions League final 5-0 against a very good Inter Milan side. And so for a lot of people, they see that and they're thinking, okay, well, this team is just they're Thanos. They're just unstoppable. But as you know, every team has a weakness, right? And so the weakness that PSG has is they are very, very vulnerable to somebody trying to play their game. Most clubs do not have the facilities to play PSG's game. Very few do, but Bayern Munich did, and Bayern Munich actually provided the blueprint for Chelsea. In the quarterfinal, and Bayern Munich took the game to PSG and had them on the back foot. They just could not finish. And so I went into this match thinking, okay, Chelsea has the players to do this, especially in the midfield. Gus, we've got your South Americans. In the midfield, you've got Moises Caicedo from Colombia. I believe he's Colombian, I think.
Yeah, Colombia.
And then Andre Santos from Brazil. You've got Enzo Fernandez from Argentina. You have all these midfielders who are supremely talented, and they're also South American, meaning they take this competition seriously. And now I want to dispel. Go ahead, Gus.
No, I was gonna say, having the South American core made them feel more into the tournament, especially on the tip of their shoulder after being almost humiliated in the second half against Flamengo.
Yeah, and the Flamengo game is an interesting one because it never felt like Chelsea was not in control of that game, but Chelsea's own mistakes cost the win, and I think that was the turning point, truly, in this tournament. And make no mistake, the South Americans always take it the most seriously of anybody. However, This Chelsea side is full of a bunch of guys who have been called all sorts of things by all sorts of people. And Levi Colwill, he is a defender and he's from the Chelsea Academy. He's British. And he came out and said before the final, if everybody thinks that we're going to lose, then what do we have to lose? And that's a very good way of thinking. And some reporter also asked Chelsea's manager Enzo Maresca, "Are you prepared for your players to suffer without the ball?" in a press conference. And I understand what he's asking, but Enzo Maresca had the perfect thing to say. He said, "Well, who said that?" And he just kind of looked at the guy because everybody expected Chelsea to sit back and try to defend like everybody else does, but it doesn't work. You have to take it to PSG, and Chelsea did. And then Cole Palmer was very clinical in front of goal. João Pedro also as well, another Brazilian, came in, and he was like a cheat code for Chelsea. As soon as he came into the squad, João Pedro started scoring goals and doing it at an alarming rate.
I mean,
And so
especially in the semis against Fluminense, and I joke about it. The law that is most followed law in the world is the X law,
mhm.
where a player that used to play for a team always scores against like their former team.
Absolutely, and that happens with Indy 11 all the time, as well. But to Joao Pedro's credit, he did everything right. He played off the ball very well. He scored two banging goals. One was top bins from outside the box, just a rocket of a shot. And not only is he doing that on his starting debut for a club that he's been at for a week, not only did he do that, he had the wherewithal to not let anybody celebrate the goal because that's his former club out of respect. And he saluted the Fluminense fans, as he was doing that. Fair play. That is everything I want. He played with a high IQ. He scored a terrific goal on his debut. He won me over. Oh, and he's a respectful person too. That's everything you want. And so going into this final, to answer your question after I rambled for so long, Nick, the answer is they just believed in themselves and took it to PSG. And PSG weren't ready to get hit in the mouth.
Absolutely. I'm just here talking with some folks here on a TikTok. Shout out to TwizBuzz here. Listening to Two Countries, Two Americas, All Sports, or discussion on the FIFA Club World Cup. And for Chelsea, right? Like I asked you this question the other day, Jason, just where does this trophy rank, for Chelsea, right? How does it stack up to the Champions Leagues or the Premier League championships? And, because I know historically European clubs haven't taken this particular competition seriously, but it feels like this is a start of a new era for this particular competition. And especially if they're going to be giving out, $2 billion in prize money, you know, I don't see like why not.
I mean,
Yeah. Go ahead, Gus. Let's hear what you have to say real quick, and then I'll answer Nick's question here because I've got an answer for him.
and I want to step in because I feel like this kind of evaluation it all depends on. I feel like it brought up a good point, Nick, because all the teams are competing, but not all the teams' valuation are the same. Because I feel like, for example, if Fluminense would have won, it would have been the biggest trophy in the club history, all time. But for Chelsea, I think it ranks in the second shelf. I think it's still a little bit low in terms of, and I think Jason is back and he can, says better. I feel like for British fans, which what I saw is that they didn't watch on television as much, so I feel like it's kind of below. I think the same level of the FA Cup for Chelsea fans.
And see, I'm gonna disagree. And I understand what you're saying, Gus. Going into this tournament, I would have probably agreed with you, but the supporters of the English clubs that were in this tournament realized really quickly this isn't your mom's Club World Cup. This isn't the four-team semifinal immediately and then win two games and you're the world
Oh,
champion.
are the ones even that they play in the 70s and 80s that Nottingham Forest, Manchester United, and Liverpool played back in the day, where there was
I hate to
only one.
derail the conversation real quick, but so I have the TV on the ESPYs just because why not? Because I just want to have stuff that's sports related. We have Russell Westbrook sitting on stage here with his collar unbuttoned, right, and then like a tie that's like halfway, that's not completely pulled up, like it's just dangling down. I don't know what's going on here. I'm sorry. Anyway, continue.
Um, and so to answer your question, Nick, um, I think that the trophy, it belongs on that first shelf, and not only for this tournament being completely different than um, any other tournament like this ever at the club level. Um, because truly it is a club world cup. You qualify based on how you do domestically and in your continental competitions, and then the top handful of teams from all of the different confederations get to go and play against each other in a World Cup style tournament. You have your group stage, you have your knockout stage. This is a proper Club World Cup. And so, anybody that actually watched it, especially the European supporters, or the supporters of the European clubs at least, started to realize, okay, first of all, this is a real tournament. Like, this is cool. Second of all, these South American squads are no joke. Fluminense, no joke. Palmeiras, no joke. Flamingo,
Flamengo.
we'll save comment for them, because I'm not going to speak ill of a Brazilian side on this podcast.
Flamengo, you can. Flamengo, you can. I'm allowing you to speak because they're so arrogant these days. I'll allow it.
Yeah, so the reason they were taking the piss. They were trying to clown Chelsea, for beating them, and then all of a sudden they turned around real quick and were like rooting for Chelsea against all the other Brazilian sides. Nah, stay in your lane,
Do you know why?
Flamengo,
Do you know why? Do you
because
know
they're a
why?
bunch of pompous idiots.
No. Do you know why? Because now they have a trophy of "We beat the world champion" trophy. They're like, "We beat the world, the team that won the tournament champion." They're like, "We beat Chelsea. That's our championship."
Yeah,
No
well,
joke.
they
And the fall basketballs beat Florida last year by 20, but it doesn't make me feel any better about what happened at the end of the year.
right. That's a copium type of trophy. And even then, Chelsea beat themselves. Any self-respecting supporter of the sport would understand that. But again, I understand. And so, you know, Boca and River Plate didn't have a very good tournament, but the Brazilian sides really, really did. And the Brazilian sides showed out. There were a couple of players whose names I don't know off the top of my head, but there was one guy, I believe he was from Palmeiras, Gus. He was a midfielder. That guy was impressive. He may have played his way into a Europe move this summer.
I mean, is he white or like? How can you describe him so I can
A
remember?
pain in the ass. That's I he was a winger, I think. He was maybe a right-sided midfielder, but I didn't know anything about any of the Brazilian sides other than Thiago Silva and Esteval Willian. I'll be honest. I don't follow the Brazilian league like I should.
Let me
Uh,
let me see. Oh, I guess you're talking about Richard Hills, number 8. That
yeah,
was
Richard Rios. Yeah, that's the one.
He's
Him.
going to Rome. He's going to Rome. Roma. He's going to Rome
Oh,
in the
so he
summer.
did play his way into a Europe move.
Yeah, he
Good for
did.
him.
He literally did.
Good for him. He and a bunch of others showed that the levels of the Brazilian league are actually quite high. And yeah, all the best players go to Europe, but at the same time, you have to take these guys seriously. And so for me as a Chelsea supporter, first and foremost, these teams from these other places are no joke, because you have Al Hilal knocking out all sorts of teams. You have the Brazilian sides knocking out all sorts of teams. You have a bunch of these teams from elsewhere where you think, oh, well, they're probably no good. Actually, they're quite decent. And so it was cool in that respect. But to answer the question, I think this absolutely goes on the top shelf, not only because it is a champions of the world in the first proper Club World Cup with teams from everywhere in a proper style of tournament, but the other thing is it's the way Chelsea went about it. Chelsea took it to the team that everybody in the world said was going to win because they had beaten Inter Milan, a very good Inter Milan team, 5-0 in the Champions League final. PSG looked like they were unbeatable. And Chelsea beat the ever loving fuck out of them for 90 straight minutes. And it was 3-0, but easily could have been 5 or 6-0. PSG had no answer for Chelsea all night. And that's why it belongs on the top, because this group of players, and you guys have heard me talk about this for a while, this new ownership brought together a bunch of really young players and not a whole lot of experience. And now they've sprinkled some experience in recently, and I think that's a lot of the reason why the levels have increased as they have. But this group of children became men in a month. And in the context of where that leaves Chelsea as a club, I think this absolutely ranks among the top trophies ever won. Now, obviously, it's a knockout tournament. You know, knockout format's a little bit different than a league. A league, you have to be really consistent for the entire calendar year. And so, for that reason, maybe it's not above the Premier League titles, but I think it's absolutely on the same level as the Champions League from 2012 and the Champions League from 2021. And the fact that, the club's going to have a big gold circle in the middle of the shirt for the next 4 years saying, oh, yeah, by the way, we're world champions. That's huge. And then I can just think there are two players I can think of off the top of my head. The first time they get into some shithousing with an opponent, they're just going to point to the badge and be like, talk to the badge, punk. And I'm ready for that. And so it's a huge win for the club, and it's a huge win for this group of players because they believed in themselves when nobody else did. And you cannot understate the value that that brings to a group of players who have never really won anything until they won the Conference League, which respectfully to the Conference League, that group, even a ragtag group of Chelsea players, should be able to go and cruise through that, which is what happened.
And I want to add to your point, Jason, that it was so funny that this recent months, Chelsea won two trophies they never won in their in the trophy shelf, but also they can say they won pretty much all the trophies they could have won. They won Premier League, they won Championship, they won Champions League, Europa League, Conference League, uh, FIFA Club World Cup, Intercontinental Cup. I mean, you name it.
Yeah, all 10 top flight trophies that they could possibly win have been won. So that's Premier League, FA Cup, Carabao Cup, um, let's see, League Cup, Europa League, Champions League, Conference League, Intercontinental Cup, Club World Cup. There's 9 of them. And Chelsea's the only club in the world to have ever won every trophy available in the top flight. And shout out to Enzo Fernandez, only person on the planet ever to have won both the Club World Cup and the regular World Cup.
Yeah, and I guess one last Chelsea question I had is, what do you think this sets them up for the upcoming Premier League season? Like, are they ready to take it to like a Liverpool man? Well, I know Man City wasn't good last year, but like obviously Liverpool. Are they ready to compete for another EPL championship?
Absolutely. This group of players just showed they can beat anybody in the world. Like I said, they took it to who everybody considered, and rightfully so, considered to be the best team in the world for 90 straight minutes and just beat the crap out of them. It's not unrealistic to say this Chelsea team should be competing for the Premier League. Now, I don't know that it happens over the course of a season so soon, because this group, while they can play with everybody, still has to grow together and still needs to find that consistent form over the course of an entire, 38 game season. But with that said, absolutely, this Chelsea team absolutely should be in the conversation. And there's no doubt in my mind that this Chelsea squad will be in the conversation when it's all said and done about May of next year.
All right, and I do want to kind of, I guess, shift us to more just about the tournament itself and its success, right? Because I know a lot of the narratives early on were like, oh, they can't fill the stadiums. There's, these matches aren't at good times or with the weather. But then, you look at like the final, for example, that thing was pretty full. Like MetLife was very full, and it was full of full of Chelsea fans, which
I thought Chelsea wasn't a big pull, though. Somewhere along the line, I heard that Chelsea wasn't a big pull, but that the Club World Cup final told me otherwise. A little birdie once told me that, and I think that little birdie may be misinformed.
I guess this little bird came to our pod, right?
I will neither confirm nor deny that this little birdie appeared on your podcast.
Yeah. But like when we look at the way this tournament unfolded in the U.S., to me overall, it seems like it was logistically a success from the outside. But obviously, the actual World Cup itself is a bigger, it's a bigger stage, right? Like it's a bigger undertaking. But to me, it seems like the U.S. seems to be ready to host. Based on what we saw, like I mean, obviously it helps that basically all of our stadiums are already there. Like we don't have to build new stadiums for the World Cup, like a lot of other countries have had to in the past.
Yeah, we don't have slave labor building stadiums like the previous World Cup had, so that's a start. But with that said, there's plenty of humanitarian questions about the United States as well that are coming from elsewhere. And so the questions that people had about Qatar are a lot of the same questions that people have about the United States and the Trump administration. Because this tournament's going to be under his administration. And so from that perspective, I think it's of a little bit of concern. But um, from a logistical perspective, I think that this country is set up quite well to host. The problem is getting fans from one city to another is quite the undertaking because there's not really rail here. There's not really public transit outside of flying. So getting fans from one city to another may be kind of a problem. But outside of that, I think all the stadiums are ready to host. MetLife Stadium ran out of water once, and I don't know. That was during the lightning delay between Chelsea and what? Which of the Brazilian teams had the lightning delay? Or no, that was versus Benfica. Sorry, that was versus Benfica before the Palmeiras game, and so you can't be having that. But other than that, there's not really been a whole lot of questions to the ability to host. It's more about filling the seats, and at that point, that's just FIFA being greedy because and whoever else is deciding ticket prices because ticket prices were outrageous for this tournament. And then by the end, they realized people aren't going to be paying triple digits for these tickets, and then started selling them for like $12.
But where are those $12 tickets? I didn't saw them anywhere.
They were on sale for wherever you could find tickets, especially getting. I got a ticket offer through my Chelsea membership. Now I didn't look at it because none of the games were close. But I heard all about there being so many top dollar tickets, and apparently they were everywhere. I can't speak to it directly, but I do know that there were a lot of complaints about that, and I think there's enough of a U.S. Of a support in the U.S. that people would have packed these stadiums if the tickets were affordable. Um, if you were selling these tickets for $20 or so in the upper level of these stadiums, I think you easily could have filled them. But when you're
Yeah,
starting to ask for so much, ridiculous prices, you're going to have some questions.
I don't understand in the United States of America, like why is better to close an entire portion of the stadium instead of selling cheaper tickets to have people there, even though they would have otherwise couldn't be there. But I would rather have more people than empty seats.
And therein lies the question that we all have. And it in my view, Gus, comes back to capitalism. They don't want to have to pay people to work in those parts of the stadium. They would rather just close those parts of the stadium and only sell tickets on the TV side of the stadium to make it appear full on television than to charge tickets for below what they view they're worth. And it's greed. And you're seeing that in American sports, and it's running rampant in American sports. But you don't really see that elsewhere. You have fans kicking off and protesting when tickets, in the Premier League go above £40 in the door, like for a match, and that's supposed to be this heinous act, and yet that doesn't even seem that far fetched to me because I've just been brought up in this environment.
Right. And also, so two things. First and foremost, shout out to Grayson12 on TikTok. He wants us to say congratulations to his brother David having his kid. So congratulations.
So I guess his kid is gonna have the same birthday as I do.
I guess so. But two, on the ticket prices, obviously for me, the biggest problem is getting in the door at Neyland. It's like just how freaking expensive it is to go to an SEC home game at this point in time. And like, I
But
don't know.
that's a little different, though. That's because there is that demand. There's not a demand for these tickets at the Club World Cup for those prices.
Yeah, because when I looked, I think it was like at Inter Miami and PSG in Atlanta. It would have been on the weekend. It was like $80 for the upper seats. I'm like, well, I know PSG is going to run Miami out of the stadium, so like, why would I spend that? Or even for like Boca Juniors versus Auckland City, which would have been a 2 p.m. kick in Nashville. So we're talking about in the middle of the stadium in the middle of the afternoon on like a 95-degree day for not a great match, and even then it was still like $20. Like it just didn't seem appealing to me.
Yeah, that's fair. I feel like it should be more popular, but it goes back to what Jason said, the FIFA greediness, and let's hopefully that in the actual uh, in the World Cup will be um, less money. Shout out to my grandma Emilia Camargo, wishing me happy birthday. Thank you, grandma. Say happy birthday, my dear grandson. Shout out Vanessa Massimo in Itaim Paulista, Sao Paulo.
Yeah,
And
and
it was,
go ahead.
and I was gonna say, I for the non-soccer viewer, I guess the moment of this FIFA Club World Cup was Donald Trump taking the center stage and pretty much just joining the lifting trophy celebration of Chelsea.
Yeah, well, I didn't expect him to show up to the Club World Cup final. Now, I expect him to show up next year to the World Cup because next year is the 250th birthday of America for July 4th and Independence Day.
But
But
I
like
feel like
this one was pretty funny. I'm not gonna lie.
I expect. I mean, and also it was uh in his home in his hometown. I mean, in
Mhm.
his backyard, New York, where he basically remember a lot of moments as a owner of the New York Generals in the USFL. So, and also when the I guess FIFA president Gianni Infantino invites you, you showed up. I mean, that's what politicians love. The
Right, and
kind
I want to say too, it was a year to the day where he got shot as well and almost died. So as well. So
Yeah, so he wanted to make an appearance, be in a moment he know he is not gonna be confronted or gonna have anybody bother him. He's gonna join a moment celebration. Show up in even the lifting trophy a part of it. I mean, that's what Donald Trump loves.
yeah, and
Being
what's
in
going to
his
be interesting next year is when the U.S. plays, right? Because the U.S. men's team has been heavily criticized by especially the right wing, right? Especially when you look at the fact that we're wearing the LGBT uniforms and just soccer culture in general in the U.S. tends to skew left wing, right? Like it just tends to be um, your average soccer fan base tends to skew left. Which there's a lot of tension in that. Like I think about like an Alexi Lawless, right, who's a very outspoken conservative on Twitter, and obviously one of the most legendary U.S. players of all time. And there is, I think, that political tension within American soccer because we talk about this whole MLS versus USL beef, but I do think there's also an interpolitical beef as well because I think there is a subsect of conservatives who view soccer as this very left-wing sport when really, we shouldn't be looking at any sport through that type of paradigm. It's like saying that, like, oh, SEC football's for conservatives. No, like that who had said that, or like, oh, NASCAR's for conservatives. And I'm just very curious, especially with as polarized as everything has been in American politics, how will the FIFA World Cup in soccer fit into that?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, of course, if the U.S. advances, I would expect more support, and feel like you know uh, that the same way conservatives kind of tend to hijack NASCAR in terms of that's our league and that's our sport, and as you point out perfectly, NASCAR is for all, not for one group. Soccer, I feel like, pretty much has this niche of, uh, more progressive people tend to be into soccer, especially because soccer is more played and more viewed in big cities. So big cities tend to be progressive.
Right. And soccer culture, it's hard to really get into soccer if you're not in the city. Like it's hard to find soccer clubs if you're outside of a city. It's hard to find any soccer development academy if you're out in a rural area. Um, and that goes beyond the MLS versus USL beef that we were talking about a few weeks ago. Like I think that's just a cultural deal. And perhaps the whole idea of, oh, is it cool or not? Like in Brazil, right? Soccer is the thing. England, soccer is the thing. In America, it just really isn't. Um, and it's just really interesting to see
No,
the
it
presence.
definitely is. It definitely is a thing. I want to dispel this really quick, Nick. Soccer absolutely is a thing. It may be a niche sport. It may only have a cult following, but it is popular enough that this easily can um, be shown. Just the sheer amount of people in this country. There's more soccer fans in this country than in most European countries, but it's just because it's kind of a niche sport here. People don't think it's popular, but it absolutely is.
Right. I mean, and what we were talking about is kind of, because he had brought up President Trump being a part of the Chelsea celebration, which I found interesting considering that, in America, it feels like there is this era of like, at least among some conservatives, as they don't like soccer because they view it as a left wing sport. They view it as a progressive sport. And I was just kind of opining about how it's going to be interesting to watch next year when we have the World Cup, with all the criticism that's been levied at the U.S. men's teams for various reasons, like, the LGBT, the pride jerseys, and, some of the stuff that gets thrown at the U.S. women's team, for example. Um, and especially in the year where we're going to have the 250th birthday of the Declaration of Independence for July 4th, and this term is going to be happening during that. It's going to be a very interesting summer, especially um, especially if the U.S. doesn't do well next year in the World Cup.
Well, I don't expect the U.S. to do well either. And there are many problems with the United States, with the Federation. And I think a lot of those problems stem directly from MLS and MLS meddling in Federation business. And, this country has enough people and resources to field a very competitive team. And yet we're dicking around with Mexico. They have their own problems. And people say, oh, well, the U.S. should be competing with Argentina and Brazil and the European powers. And I agree. We have the facilities. We have the people, we have the resources to do that, and yet we're still screwing around with Mexico and Canada and the CONCACAF nations of Central America and the Caribbean. It's infuriating. And in truth, Nick, I think MLS is at fault for a lot of it. The propping up of MLS at all levels of the U.S. Soccer Federation is the reason why this national team and the pool itself are very, very subpar. You see these players, first and foremost, our best players have to either, if you are not one of these three archetypes of player, right, you're probably going to have a very uphill climb. You have to either be the child of a soccer player, for one. So, like Gio Reyna falls into this category. He is the son of Claudio Reyna, who is a United States national team legend. Okay? So he is one of these types. Or you had to go to Europe early. Christian Pulisic is one of those. He went to Borussia Dortmund as a 16-year-old. And then you have to, or you are the child of a serviceman abroad who grew up abroad in a Europe-style academy. If you are not one of those three types of players, you are at an extreme disadvantage when it comes to being prepared to play at a high level that the international game requires. And if you aren't one of those three, you have to be really, really special to make it through and to do well. Okay? And everybody says, oh, well, Landon Donovan didn't play in Europe. Yeah, he did. Landon Donovan went to Europe when he was 17. He didn't like Europe, and he came back because he was homesick. But every time he played in both the Bundesliga in Germany and the Premier League in England, he did very well in both. When he played for Everton and he played for Bayer Leverkusen in Germany, those teams he did very well for. But he came back because he was homesick.
Or even I'll add another player that he was even a guest on our podcast a couple of years ago. He used to play for Atlanta United as well. He played in Brazil for São Paulo when he was 15 years old. Greg Garza.
Yeah, if you don't come up through a legitimate academy, and now there are plenty of legitimate academies in South America. They produce more talent per capita than just about anywhere. However, most of the U.S. players that doesn't apply to, because most of the U.S. players who are dual nationals grow up abroad because they're the sons of servicemen that are serving in Europe. So I agree, Gus. I agree, but generally speaking, for our pool, this is primarily Europe, but regardless, agreed. And if you aren't one of those three archetypes, you're going to have a really big problem, because what do you think? The best players in our country who aren't one of those three, they go to college. And then when they're 18 to 22, those are prime development years, and they're spent not only not focusing on soccer, they're spent with restrictions from the NCAA to how often they can train and what kind of coaching they can have. Oh, and they're splitting time with school as well. And so you take 4 of the prime development years away from most of our best players. It's set up so backwards.
And on top of that, Jason, when you're in summer, for example, you can't sign with a pro league. You can only sign, for example, with NPSL or USL, not USL, like UPSL.
USL League 2.
Yeah, or those which are basically semi-amateur. Like, they're not like all developed league.
Exactly. And that is the problem, because you have guys, and now you can sign with like MLS academies, and a few players do that, but most of them don't. Most of these players play for USL League 2 teams or
NPSL,
NISA, NPSL, any of these other amateur leagues, and they miss 4 years of their primary development. And so by the time that these kids are 21, 22, and they're leaving college, they're so far behind, because they're playing against guys on other national teams that have been in academies since they were 6, 7, 8 years old. And when you expect to be able to go against those teams and beat them, you're delusional. And the way that it's set up here is not conducive to a good talent pool. And that's why I hope more kids follow the Diego Luna route. Diego Luna scored 2 goals against Guatemala. He was the breakout star of the Gold Cup for the United States. And Diego Luna, when he was 17 years old, signed with El Paso Locomotive of USL Championship. He was one of the top players in the country in high school, and he just signed a professional contract, and he worked his way up. And now he's in MLS, and he's probably played himself into a Europe move just by developing his game in a traditional way. He came up playing high school soccer, but he went to, I don't remember which, he went to one of the like Europe regional academies that they have set up that are kind of like IMG Academy. They're set up kind of like that. And he went and played in one of those, and then El Paso signed him out of there. He played well for Mark Lowry for El Paso, and then he moved up to Real Salt Lake. And now he's found his way up into the national team pool, and he's been called up. And now he's played his way potentially into a Europe move during this transfer window. And I hope Diego Luna's story inspires more of our top youth players to play professionally early. Because the more players that play professionally early, especially when they sign with, MLS Next or USL Championship or wherever, even League One, USL League One, any of these other leagues, even if you aren't going directly to MLS, you can make your way up to and then beyond MLS through these other leagues. And the guest from a couple weeks ago, that is the radio announcer for Atlanta United, made a comment that it was insane that I believed that MLS is closer to USL Championship than they are to like the Brazilian top flight or the South American top flight. And that is insane to me, the amount of MLS propaganda that was coming out of his mouth, respectfully, because that's just that's categorically false in every conceivable way. And this Diego Luna thing is proof of that. Diego Luna came directly from USL Championship and immediately went and started lighting it up in MLS. The USL Championship is no joke. And people that are in the MLS circles want to prop up MLS as this league that can compete with, the Brazilian top flight or these European leagues, and that's just not the case. MLS is a joke compared to those leagues. They have names, but so does Saudi Arabia. So does China. They have names, and they didn't do anything. There's no difference between MLS, Saudi Arabia, and China. They're trying to buy their way up to success, and you just cannot do that. Soccer is a grassroots sport. If you do not have grassroots movements, if you do not have grassroots support, you can't buy your way into that culture. And Saudi Arabia is learning that right now. They can't pay, there's some of these guys they want to sign, they can't pay any amount of money for them to come over there. And it's the same thing with MLS. The only thing the U.S. has going over Saudi Arabia is that it's the U.S. And people want to live in the U.S. And now, granted, for a lot of the African players, your Leroy Sané's or, Riyad Mahrez, these African players may want to go to Saudi Arabia, especially the African Muslims. Sure, that's a great place for them culturally to go and fit in. They can get those types of players. But when you're trying to be a world-renowned league on that level, you can't buy into the culture that it takes to build something that serious and that competitive. And that's why I think MLS is really having a hard time, because MLS has talent, and then they still keep getting beat by these USL teams with vastly inferior talent. They underachieve with more resources, and they are the domestic league equivalent of the United States national team. And so respectfully, to the guest from a couple weeks ago, I just cannot agree with his statements that MLS is that high up on the list, because sure, you look at the box score and say, oh, well, in the Open Cup, MLS is, they went 15-1 against USL this week in this round of the Open Cup or whatever. And then you fail to realize that all those games were way closer than they ever needed to be given the talent disparity on the field. And like Indy 11's not even good this year. And Indy 11 took a Philadelphia Union team who is pretty decent. They're not great, but they're an MLS team. And Kevin Sullivan, who is supposed to be the next great U.S. phenom soccer player, took them to penalties. And Indy 11's not even good this year. That's very telling. And it's an indictment of MLS rather than it's a prop up of USLC. But to suggest that MLS is not closer to USLC than they are like the top flight in Brazil is just disingenuous on every single conceivable level.
Gus, I think you're muted.
I really wish to see a debate between the Jasons, because that's a really good debate in terms of, arguments, because that's what I feel America lacks of. People that are in the system, in soccer, following the leagues, debating and find a better solution for the sport to be better. I think that's something that is really valuable in the least, in my opinion. But, and I go.
Yeah, and before you move on, Gus, I need to respond to that, because you're right. Discourse like this is what grows the sport, right? And it's MLS circles, and it's a lot of the same propaganda that he was saying to you guys that I disagreed with. It's a lot of the sentiment that comes out of these MLS circles is that MLS has it right, and if you're not MLS, you're against the growth of the game, and that's so wrong and disingenuous. And the fact that people are anti-MLS is not because they hate the league for trying to grow the game. People hate the league because they're trying to grow the game in a backwards way that doesn't make any sense. You don't grow the game by closing it off. You don't grow the game by making it a yacht club, which essentially is what MLS is. You have to buy into the league. You can't earn your way up. There's no grassroots teams in all of MLS. They're all the only grassroots movements that MLS had, MLS stomped out and tried to, St. Louis City is a great example. San Diego Loyal, another great example. Grassroots teams that were snuffed out by MLS, and it's a very calculated and shrewd move from MLS. They want to try to let these other leagues grow fan bases and then go kill off their teams. That doesn't grow the game at all. That's so backwards, and it is a problem. But as long as people keep shilling for the MLS and keep backing the backwards thinking of Don Garber and company of the MLS, just because they have money, they think they know better than everybody else. And then you have actual grassroots support in so many different places, and MLS fans can't be bothered because MLS caters, Gus, especially you understand this. MLS caters to the average American sports fan. It's set up like an American league, whereas leagues like USL Championship, just like leagues like the USL in general, are set up more like leagues are abroad, and that's why people enjoy those leagues more. There are so many people that like USL that don't like MLS because MLS is set up like an American sporting league, whereas USL is not. And I think when you have an issue growing the game, every other country in the world has done it basically the same way, except for you. Maybe you're the problem. And MLS, in my opinion, is holding back U.S. soccer in a lot of ways. And so, Gus, I'm sorry to just go on that long rant, but and sorry to interrupt you just now, but that's something that needed to be said. The fact that there isn't welcomed discourse from MLS and MLS circles that completely shut out discourse like this is one of the primary reasons that soccer is not growing in this country at the rate that it should, given the popularity of it in this country.
And especially the kind of, I think, disingenuity of soccer media in America. I feel like they are because I covered Atlanta United for 1 year, really covered from back to end, like a lot of games, and I saw the American soccer media not be into the game itself, not asking Tata Martino a single question about formation, about choices of subbing, So I tend to don't take it seriously, the American soccer media, because they're just cheerleaders. They're not analysts. I feel like American soccer media are a bunch of cheerleaders, not analysts. Like in the NFL, you don't see, for example, Mike Vrabel, Mike Tomlin been asked about, fan things. Like look at a press conference from MLS game and an NFL game. Like it's absurd, the difference. And I've been to both.
I mean, I just listened to your average Tennessee radio station during college football season. I mean, they'll rip whatever tactical issues they have, but
yeah, and Gus is absolutely right, Nick. Both of you guys are. And one thing that I noticed, Gus, I haven't covered a team for a season, but I did cover the World Cup qualifier in Nashville. It was the U.S. versus Canada. And I was in one of those press conferences where everybody was just asking crap that didn't matter. Now, I didn't ask about formations or anything. My question was for the mayor of Nashville. And I asked specifically about the World Cup bid. And, was this their dress rehearsal was this their audition, I guess, as it were, to be a World Cup host? Because the bid was coming in very shortly after that round of World Cup qualifiers was finished. And so I didn't personally ask about that, but I noticed everything you're saying, Gus, to be accurate. Nobody asked, I'm trying to think who the coach was, excuse me, at the time.
Greg Berhalter?
It was either Berhalter or his predecessor. Nobody asked him, tactical questions. They asked about players that they had heard of, but the soccer media in this country don't actually watch soccer, I think.
No.
I think it's just a bunch of people that they look up, oh, well, this guy's playing for AC Milan. This guy's playing for Juventus. These guys should be pretty good. They're playing in Europe. And then they don't know anything about the game. And then when you talk to a soccer supporter, somebody that genuinely understands the game and genuinely understands the intricacies and the nuances of how it works, like you and I do, Gus, when you talk to somebody like us, it's a completely different conversation than it is about, because these other people, and this is the example I'll leave you, Gus. The media talks about, oh, well, this is a golden generation of U.S. players. You have Tim Weah playing in France. You have Gio Reyna playing in Germany. You have Christian Pulisic playing in Italy. This team should be good. And then all the American soccer fans that are actual supporters are like, no, this team is actually really bad. They're a bunch of underachievers. And it's a completely different discourse.
Or even though I'll go beyond your point, like, okay, they're playing in those teams in Europe, but how they are used there, how they're being developed, or how they're being, how their achievements there. It's not just, oh, they are in AC Milan, but are they playing in the starters, reserves, or not even being called for a game? Like, or the way that, AC Milan coach uses Pulisic different than what Pochettino uses in the U.S. National team. Question that we are used to all the time here in Brazil. Like the question is, for example, is Carlo Ancelotti how he's going to use Neymar? Like Santos using as a midfielder, number 10, or as a striker? That's a question that people understand soccer completely. And what bothered me the most when I covered Atlanta United, and what's so funny about it, is that Tata Martino, when he was so funny. He loved the question from American media, but when it comes to our question, he always felt a little uncomfortable because he knew I would ask him tough questions, like about legitimate soccer questions.
Yeah, and that has to be a breath of fresh air, but at the same time, it keeps him it kind of on his
In,
toes because not everybody is going to just not everybody's going to let him skate by. And I think the more and more that people ask those tough questions, the better off we'll be in the long run. But the problem is people here don't understand the game enough to actually ask those questions.
Right. And
and,
like I'll fully admit I'm one of those people. I'm not a tactical expert. I definitely don't know the game like y'all do.
no,
Yeah.
and it's fair. And it's fair, Nick. You're growing into a game. It's fair. I mean,
Right.
if you,
And you also don't claim to know, which is different from all these people that claim to know that are the media. That, oh well, I watch enough, I know about it. No, you don't. You're lying to yourself and to everybody.
Exactly. Like I've never claimed to be an expert. Now I'll try to make at least some points that I realize, but it's more of like a tempo or whatever. I
but,
can't sit here and tell you like
but,
formation.
but at least you're humble enough to be like, I don't fully understand. I'll try to evaluate him as I can, but I'm not like, no, I watch soccer, I understand, but I cannot even a question about, oh, did you change the formation 4-4-3 to 4-3-3 to 4-4-2? How are you gonna use this player in the midfield or a winger, or how your team is pressuring more on offense, or kind of like
Right.
legitimate.
Like the most tactical thing I know about is a false nine, but I learned about that from Ted Lasso, so not like an actual game. So.
And
You're not going to go into this, asking Pochettino if he's going to use Jedi Robinson as an inverted fullback, and for a lot of American media, Gus, that's like I was speaking a different language, and that's ridiculous. Because
yeah,
if you're covering the game, you need to know
yeah.
about tactical things like that and
Eh,
and how the game works. And people here just don't. And the
eh,
people that do aren't in the positions to report on it.
yeah, like for example, when I covered American sports, especially football, I was humble enough to be the one asking kind of the same questions the American media was asking soccer. I asked that in football. I was humble enough. I'm not gonna ask, for example, Jamie Pruitt when he was the Tennessee football head coach. When I covered the Tennessee football, a question about formations on offense, on defense, special teams, because I don't fully know football enough, American football enough, because I didn't, be on the culture for that long. I was humble enough on that. But what's staring me the most that those American soccer media people, they were paid to be there. When you are paid to be there, you should, kind of try to learn the game that you're supposed to be there. Like, and on top of that, that will be my last comment. In Brazil, I'll say there has been what 20 to 25 years, like 23 years, that the NFL has been growing in the country. From the begin when it was like replays on ESPN, and then the Super Bowl live on ESPN and band sports, and now we have not only ESPN but on public television, and now the game in Brazil. But if you see the debates that happen even on podcasts with the NFL in Brazil, people are knowledgeable about. They can talk about the way a wide receiver is going to be positioned at, what a formation in football. So it's so funny that Brazil football media is more knowledgeable about football than American soccer media is more knowledgeable about soccer.
Yeah, that's the truth. And it's because the people that cover soccer in this country, a lot of them think that, okay, well, it's not popular. I don't have to know because it's not popular. That's categorically false. It is very popular. You just don't get into it on that level. And you don't go and talk to the grassroots supporters, and I talk up my club Indy 11 all the time, but Indy 11 is truly a grassroots club. Our supporters group was founded 2 years before our club was founded, and our club was founded on the back of the efforts that our supporters made. That is grassroots. You don't
100%.
have that in MLS, and these people don't cover USL. They think, oh, well, it's just a minor league. It's not a minor league. It's a second division league, but that's completely different than a minor league, because sure, you can move up, but these players don't, you don't just have Nashville SC calling up players from One Knox, or from Memphis, and people don't understand that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very legitimate league, as I got to witness in person last year when they went down and beat Atlanta in person. So it was it's just gonna be fascinating to see how this really progresses over the next year. And I feel like a lot of these issues we've talked about are really gonna come to a head next year.
Yeah. And as far as you were saying about the Open Cup, Nick, games like that are the exact reason MLS wants to kill off the Open Cup. And the Open Cup is the best thing that ever happened to the soccer in the United States.
Yeah.
Is you put every team anywhere at any level is welcome in this tournament. And you have college teams, you have amateur, like summer league teams, you have professional teams of all the different various levels, all playing against each other. MLS doesn't like to play in the Open Cup, and they tried to kill off the Open Cup because they aren't as far ahead as they think they are.
Or do you know why, Jason? Because the U.S. Open Cup is a truly only thing that was truly copied by the British way to mentality of soccer. Because what competition did they copy? The FA Cup. Literally the FA Cup. What is the FA Cup? Teams from 8th, 7th, 6th division try to play. And I stumbled upon a video that Manchester United play against Exton City in 2005 in a 3,000 stadium, 3,000 spectator stadium, and the FA allowed that, and they earn it because they draw in their first game, and that's what the magic about it. And the Premier League didn't try to kill off the FA Cup because they know how important the FA Cup it is for the spread of the game, not only be concentrated in the big cities like London, Manchester, and Liverpool.
Yeah, I mean, I was also thinking about Tottenham versus Marine FC. I believe it was 2011. Tottenham won 5-0. And it was literally, you had like freaking apartments in this small British town overlooking freaking Tottenham playing, because they were playing in like Marine FC, and they were just like basically a neighborhood street park that you would find, which was insane.
The magic of the U.S. Open Cup is that it allows the organic growth of the game in a way that closed leagues like MLS do not offer. Nick, I have a question for you specifically.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like when you went to the Open Cup game between Chattanooga Red Wolves and Chattanooga FC? Both third division clubs in the United States. These are clubs that MLS likes to pretend don't exist. How was this
single best sporting event I've ever been to in this city right here?
How was the energy? How was the attendance? How was the game? Let's hear about it.
It was a Tuesday night in April. And keep in mind, in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which obviously historically isn't a soccer town, we're talking about Tennessee first and foremost, not a soccer state. Chattanooga, right, a mid-sized city where football's king. So yeah, a soccer match between two teams, not supposed to really get that many people. 12,000 people showed up. 12,000. That's more than the UTC Mocs get in that same stadium in the fall for college football. That's the most energized I've seen that stadium since the Mocs were playing like Appalachian State and Georgia Southern when they were still in the SoCon back in the early 2010s. And
again, I want it to be known, Nick. Not only is Chattanooga not a soccer town, Tennessee not really a soccer state, those are third division clubs. One from MLS Next Pro, one from USL League One. Both third division.
It was so passionate. You had literally the Red Wolves sticking their flag at midfield and it causing a brawl, basically.
And that's what the beauty of the game is about. That's what we love soccer, for Christ's sake.
Yeah. And now Chat's FC hates our news station. So
there There is no reason that something like that can't happen in any other city. And you have a couple of cities that have multiple clubs. You have New York. New York has the New York metropolitan area has
Oh,
three, four,
yeah.
four
I
clubs.
I actually went to a U.S. Open Cup between NYCFC and Rebels back in 2017. Yeah, back in no 2017. Yeah, 2017, and it was one of the most single great experiences as a fan in the United States, probably the biggest, was a magical night. The NYCFC fans treated me so well. Of course, I rooted for them, and I was wearing a jersey. And and it was funny that I purchased through the Red Bulls, and I arrived there, and they were like, "Oh, you bought the ticket to the on air, but you can stay with us." And the fans chanted for 90 minutes. Of course, we were sad when we left because Red Bull won the game, but I felt the same passion that Nick felt on the Chattanooga Derby, on the New York Derby, on the U.S. Open Cup.
Yeah, and New York has four teams. Four. You have NYCFC, you have Red Bulls, and then you also have Cosmos, who are coming back, and you have the new Brooklyn team that's beginning next year. And then LA has three teams. You have LAFC, LA Galaxy, and then also you have Orange County FC, which is based just out of Anaheim. So you have three teams in the LA area. But other than that, you don't really have cities with more than one team. Miami has two teams, but only one of them is successful. The other one is surviving solely on one man's spite. So
You
that
talk
really,
about you talk about Miami United with Roberto Secca, the Italian owner.
yeah, Miami FC. They have the one guy who is just bankrolling them out of spite. They have more than one team, but there's no reason that big cities can't have more than one team. And Derby, if more cities had multiple teams across multiple leagues, again, that is organic growth because nothing is better for growing the game than looking across town to these bastards wearing a different color and giving them the middle finger. There is nothing like that.
Like,
Nothing better.
Yeah,
yeah,
and like it's so entrenched in our local politics here too. It's fantastic.
and, and
That's what we
And
need.
that's what makes it so much fun. Most derbies are political or cultural in nature.
like here in Brazil too, in my city. Like for example, when União Barbarense literally got promoted, the next day Rio Branco fans were like, "Oh, damn it, they got promoted." But next year, Derby, 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 Derby. Like all Rio Branco and União Barbarense talk about is about the Derby, and it's gonna be next year, January or February or March or whatever. But that's all we can think of because it's a game that transcends the championship. It's about two cities that love and hate each other. They're
Yeah.
literally divided by an avenue that and and that's what got your point, Jason.
Yeah. Most crosstown derbies or like nearby city derbies are so passionate and so fierce because of a cultural division or a political division or pick your different divisive subject and you can find one in Germany. Hamburg has one of the biggest derbies in the world. They have HSV, who are a historic giant, and then they have St. Pauli, who are a club who is fine being in the lower leagues, but they're very political. And if you don't agree with them, then you're a fascist. And the Old Firm in Glasgow, Scotland. You have Rangers, who are the Protestant club, versus Celtic, who are the Catholic club. Or in Buenos Aires, you have Boca, who are the working class club. And then you have River Plate, who are, I mean, their nickname is Los Millonarios because they play in a rich area and always spend more money than everybody. And they have like the upper class fans. When you have cultural divides like
Or
that,
or even in Brazil, the biggest one I call in terms of two teams is Grêmio and Internacional, and that rivalry is so big that Coca-Cola, when they sponsor Grêmio, had to put their logo in black
And ball.
because
Yep.
because they don't wear red. When there's like Christmas celebrations in Gremio, households, the Santa Claus wear blue. They don't wear red.
I've heard of the Coca-Cola thing before, and stuff like that is fascinating. You find that occasionally in the United States when it comes to college sports, primarily. College rivalries are the only thing that come close to soccer rivalries. And now there's one example, and I hate to bring it up on this podcast because they are a rival, but I respect it. It's in Lexington, Kentucky, home of the University of Kentucky. There is a Wendy's just off the campus of UK. It's maybe across the street or down the block or whatever. Wendy's are red, which is the University of Louisville color, and that's UK's biggest rival. And that Wendy's is blue. It's the only blue Wendy's in existence. And it's funny because I respect the pettiness. I respect that a lot because I would do the same thing if I had you know
Long
if
long long John Silver's, which is blue, I think.
yeah, Long John Silver's is like blue and yellow. I don't know if I was a franchise owner of one of these places, or if I was the manager of whatever, or the owner of whatever store with a blue logo, 100%, if I was in Louisville, wouldn't have a blue logo because that it runs deep. I got my degree on the wall. I got my other degree on the wall. Tennessee and Louisville, those are my alma maters, and each of them have a big rivalry with Kentucky. I'm not putting blue in any of my stuff. And if I'm starting a business in Louisville or in Knoxville, and you know, that type of passion that people love about college sports is why soccer is so great. And people just don't understand how passionate it can get. And, you think about the cultural divide, like in a city like Chicago, you have the White Sox that are the working class team, and you have the Cubs who are the team of kind of the upper class. So you have those sort of divides. Why do you think the Chicago, baseball series is so popular? Or the Mets and the Yankees for the same reason. The Mets are the working class team. The Yankees are like the upper class team. Those types of cultural divides make sports special.
Oh yeah, it's what we love about the sport.
Yeah, I mean as I said, just more passion. We need more passion as a country to see the American sport grow, or the sport grow here in the U.S. All right, some other quick soccer notes. Uh, Gus, I know Rio Bronco, they lost again to Gariani.
Wow, yeah, that was tough, 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 tough night. Oh my God, it's really freaking tough night. Jesus Christ! I mean, uh, the things are not going good. Fans are criticizing the GM, you know, and I think it's a little bit unfair because he pretty much dig the club out of a hole, and in this rebuild and this tournament. I mean,
Got them
it's
promoted.
yeah, they got them promoted and won a championship after 12 years. So and and this and this Paulista Cup, there's no money from the Paulista Federation to play. It's pretty much a league for kind of the to have some sort of a calendar for the teams that are not in the national divisions, and hopefully now on Sunday they can win, and we'll see about that. But Jason, thanks so much for hopping up, and that was a great debate, by the way.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. It's a pleasure as always. And Gus, I love to talk soccer anytime you want to have me on. So I appreciate it. And we'll chat soon, boys. Happy birthday, Gus.
Absolutely, Jason. Great as always to have you on. And obviously, congratulations to Chelsea for winning the 2025 FIFA Club World Cup. Some just other quick notes. I don't know if you want to touch on Brazilian Championship 14.
Yeah. Because Neymar is back and pretty much scored a beautiful goal. And we're gonna try to pull up because it was really big, really beautiful. I mean, Santos fans are saying he's back. I mean, calm down a notch, but what a beautiful goal. I mean, I think I can pull up. Let me see. Yeah.
Yeah, while you're pulling that up, I'm going to just briefly mention on the American side of things, Rodrigo de Paul from Atletico Madrid is going to join Messi in Miami. And there's been rumors of him returning to Europe, which I just don't see that being very likely. I mean, Messi is getting much older in age at this point. I don't know why he would go back to Europe at this point.
The goal is ready. The goal is ready. See how beautiful it was. Look, Guilherme pass to Neymar. Look how he dribbles one, dribbles two, and scores.
There you go.
Beautiful magic.
That's the type of creativity that you want to see, a year out from the World Cup.
Yes, that's what we Brazilian fans definitely want to see from him, 100%. So that was a great, beautiful goal by Neymar. Corinthians won on the road against Ceará. That was surprising. Thales Magno, former NYCFC player, scored a beautiful goal. Sao Paulo tied against Red Bull Bragantino, and Palmeiras also tied at home against Mirassol. So it was okay. I say goodish week for the Sao Paulo teams, because especially between the teams against each other in the state of Sao Paulo, 2 draws and 2 wins. I think Santos was the biggest win of all. Like all the pundits were giving Flamengo like being favorite, but Santos has Neymar and he hopefully is back.
Absolutely. Some other quick American notes here. MLB All Star Weekend was this week. I'm going to be honest, I didn't really watch any of it. I'm just not really interested in any All Star events. However, it is notable to note that they had a swing off to finish off the All Star game, which is interesting. I mean, for an All Star game, fine. Just don't ever actually determine actual games based off of this, because that would be very dumb, in my opinion. Maybe if there's some sort of Jason says Cal Riley's dad hit him pitching to him in the home run derby. Yeah. Cal Riley, actually I have a friend who actually played with Cal Riley growing up, which is very cool. So obviously, great story there with what Cal Riley's been doing this year in the MLB, the home run leader. But I definitely don't want to see the swing off anywhere near a regular season game, just because it just seems super weird to me. But in any case, yeah.
But what at least was a good attendance. I think Atlanta really did a good show.
Oh, for sure. I mean, they should have hosted it 4 years ago. But we all know there were we all know the reasons why that didn't happen back then. Same, but yeah, still better than a ghost runner at second base. Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, just go back to the way it used to be. Baseball had done it a certain way for over 100 years. Now we're going to change it. The only change that's been good is the pitch clock. So, yeah. But I'm glad Atlanta hosted 7 big in baseball this year, because certainly they're not hosting any postseason games, because, the Braves are just not very good this year. But I really don't have any room to complain about the Braves, because, we've been good for several years now. So, it's just a rebuild year at this point. But I know for the Mets, they're in contention. And I guess while we're on MLB, what is one thing you're watching for in the second half of this year?
Oh, definitely my New York Mets. I mean, they are, head to head with the Phillies for the NL East. I mean, they are on second place by half a game. So this NL East, the competition is going to be brutal between the Phillies and Mets. And I think it's going to go this half a game, one game and a half up until September.
Yeah. Also, you're going to see that, I think, in the NL Central as well, between the Cubs and the Brewers. The Cardinals are not that far behind at 6.5. And just looking across the league, the Tigers have an 11.5 heading into the second half. But the AL East as well. The Toronto Blue Jays have been so hot heading into the break. Does the break cool them off at all? And can the Yankees and the Red Sox really get it going themselves?
But how about the Red? I mean, you talk about being hot. The Red Sox, since trading Rafael Devers, what a run! They won their last 10 games.
Yeah. People were like, "Oh, why is Boston doing that? Why are they selling?" Once again, baseball is not an individual sport. It's all about team chemistry, and clearly for Boston, something about that move has improved their team chemistry.
I mean, they were below 500, and now they are 3 games behind the Blue Jays.
Exactly. So that's going to be a crazy second round. I hope we get a Yankees Red Sox series with like stakes on the line because there's nothing better in MLB than Yankees.
I have a feeling they're gonna be in the playoffs, and there's gonna be like a wild card or a divisional round.
Yeah. It's because Devers is a cancer. Lol. That's what Jason Warwick has to say in the comments. So I'll take his word for it on that. And in baseball, it certainly feels like that could be the case. But we'll see what happens in the second half of the year for the MLB. Now, NFL preview time. It's time for our second division. Last week we previewed the AFC South. We both agreed that the Houston Texans should win the division with relative ease. Now, the NFC South might be a little trickier to figure out. Now, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have won 4 straight NFC South championships. Of course, Baker Mayfield's at quarterback, and they had a top 5 unit on offense last year. When you look at, they still have Mike Evans, who's still producing at a very high level. You have your rookie Miguel Buga coming in, who I think is going to be a very good receiver for them in the long run. They still have Cade Otton at tight end and Bucky Irvin in the backfield. Like this is a really, really solid offensive unit, and the Bucks last year had a very good season, but then got upset in the first round by Washington at home in the playoffs. Now Washington went on to then upset Detroit, so that was no fluke. But for Tampa Bay, do we think they're in a situation where, yeah, you're a good team who you're going to win your division, but do we feel like, especially with Baker Mayfield, they're just never going to quite get to that Super Bowl contender mark, because obviously they won a Super Bowl with Brady back in 2021, but it doesn't feel like this particular core is going to win a Super Bowl, but they're good enough to win a division. You're muted, Gus.
I think the NFC South is not up for grabs for the Bucks as it was like last year. I think Atlanta is gonna looks like all in on Michael Penix. I mean, that was the move when they draft them, but the big question of all is about the Carolina Panthers, because can Bryce Young finally break through and lead the Panthers to a winning division? Because he was drafted as this messiah that was going to change a franchise like Ken Newton did in the mid 2010s.
Right, and the thing about Carolina is they played really well the second half of last year. Like, and they lost a lot of those games, but they were losing those games very closely, and they were very competitive in a lot of those losses. And it seems like with Dave Canales, a head coach, that something was beginning to click. And I like a lot of their young talent. Of course, they drafted Ted McMillan, 8th overall. And I just think Bryce Young does have a lot to work with on that roster, because they have Chuba Hubbard, who played very, very well. And additionally, too, the defense here, I mean, you got Derek Brown in the defensive line, J.C. Horn back in the secondary. Like the Panthers have got some really, really good players. Like they're in a much better roster spot than they were this time last year, or especially 2 years ago when they were just horrible. I do believe that the Panthers Well, I'm not going to go out and say they can win a division this year. They're going to be competitive. Don't be surprised if they make it to the second half of the year and they're in striking distance. Now, the Falcons, as you mentioned, in theory, yes, they've got the talent, right? Like Michael Penix, if he can continue to develop, he can be a really good quarterback in this league. Of course, Bijan Robinson, arguably the best young running back in the game. I mean, he is incredible. Now, I still don't know if it was wise for Atlanta to use the 8th overall pick on him a year ago, but 1,400 yards later, I can't argue with the results, right? And of course, you still have Drake London on as a receiver, and you have several other good receivers. Of course, the golden goose there is Kyle Pitts, and Kyle Pitts is one of those guys that he's got the talent, but he's never been great. Like he's been okay, he's been good, and obviously from a fantasy perspective, a complete disaster. But we're not talking about fantasy football; we're talking about real football. When I look at the Panthers and look at the Falcons, right? The Falcons definitely do feel closer, especially if Penix takes a step forward. Granted, my problem with Atlanta though is they have a new DC in Atlanta, and they did have to make some changes on the defensive side of the ball, more so than Tampa had to do. So, yeah, but definitely those are the 3 most interesting teams. Well, I mean, I know we haven't brought the New Orleans Saints here. The Saints are, in my opinion, are probably going to be the worst team in the league this year.
Yeah, they're years away still from being a contender. I think they're going to be in quite some rebuilding mode because they were for almost a decade a contender, from back, when they won the Super Bowl back in 09 to pretty much, the late 2010s. I mean, their last, of course, truly chance was the 2018-2019 run where they went to the NFC Championship and lost to the Rams.
Right. I mean, and definitely the interesting thing here is, are they going to roll the dice and throw out Tyler Shuck as their quarterback? Of course, he's the rookie quarterback from Louisville. They drafted him in the second round. Did they roll with him? Did they roll with Spencer Rattler? Especially after Derek Carr retired so late in the offseason. In either case, though, I don't expect either one of them to be great. And this feels like a setup potentially for an Arch Manning type, potentially to come to New Orleans next year. But as for this year, when I look at these 4 teams, I think the question is, I expect Tampa's offense to be really, really good. I expect Tampa in general to be really good. Do I expect Atlanta and or Carolina to be consistent enough to overcome Tampa? And while I think it's going to be closer than it was last year, I just can't say yes to either one of those teams. Like I'm still going to stick with Tampa to win the division. And Jason Warwick says Shuck has a very similar profile to Derek Carr. Never going to be a superstar, but will have a high floor and serviceable. Well, sure. I mean, if that happens, go ahead.
I think it's going to be a really closer battle, as I said, but I still feel like Tampa's going to win again.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Tampa until I'm proven otherwise. But definitely, it feels like Tampa and Atlanta should have a really good battle. And it feels like Atlanta, like especially if things click for them, could battle for a wild card spot. So Carolina's still probably a year away, but this should be the most watchable Carolina football team we've seen in quite some time as well. So the NFC South, I think, should be overall more entertaining than the AFC South. Whereas in that division, you had Houston, and then everyone else is just like, well, Jacksonville, they've got Travis Hunter, but like the rest of the team, it's not interesting. The Titans are in just absolute rebuild mode, and the Colts are, in is Anthony Richardson. Are we just completely done with Anthony Richardson mode? So I think the NFC South has more positive momentum within the teams overall than the AFC South does at this time. But in any case, we'll both take the Bucs to win that division. Also, one more NFL note. Von Miller is signing with the Washington Commanders. So he is still going in the league.
Both sides, I think he's going to be a good veteran defensive player for a team that had a good defense but found their quarterback.
Right, but like Von Miller at this stage in his life, right? He's 36 years old at this point. Like, I don't think he's going to bring you much. Now, it's a depth piece, 100%. Like, I don't even know if he's a starter at this point in his career. Like, he played in 13 games last year. So, and he did get 6 sacks. So, like, he'll be a rotational piece. But like, he's not the Von Miller that was dominating in Denver a decade ago. But you don't need him to be on that squad. Now, next week we are going to begin college football previews by conference. But SEC Media Days is this week down in Atlanta. Of course, there's all kinds of talk. All the coaches kind of blustering about, oh, this is talking season, but we're ready for real football season. Of course, the only one I really listened to was my boy Josh Heupel, heading into his 5th season. And the fact he's made it 5 years, congratulations, right? Because, a lot of Tennessee coaches have not made it this far at Tennessee, and especially not with the success that Josh Heupel has had. I mean, Josh Heupel has only had, I believe, 2 coaches that have gotten more wins in 4 years in their first 4 seasons than he has, Bill Battle and Philip Fulmer. And both of those guys were inheriting much better situations.
Way better.
So, of course, Heupel has done a very, very good job. Even though there's some people online that don't think so. But which is just, completely asinine to me still to this day. Like, I get it that we still haven't beaten Georgia. I get we haven't won a playoff game. But, guys, we were losing to Georgia State and losing to Kentucky at home by 27. Please get real for us.
It was funny. I was watching the last media day of Jeremy Pruitt, and good God, how he was a snake oil salesman.
Yeah. But Josh Heupel, though, hey, we believe in him. And, of course, obviously, it's so funny because in his remarks, he's like, I know you're going to ask me about it, so I'm going to say it. We have an open quarterback competition. I like where all 3 of our guys are at, and we'll let them go at it. So, does that make you nervous that there's an open quarterback competition, Gus? Because obviously we all know why this is the case. Of course, so he's not just handing the starting job to Joey Aguilar. We're going to have a battle between him, George McIntyre, and Jake Merklinger.
I think that's a fair point. It's just definitely Heupel wants to keep these neat. Maybe Aguilar is the front runner, but he's not gonna just hand it to him. He's gonna have to earn it. That's probably what he wants to say about it.
Right, and obviously, there's no benefit to him in saying that at all. What I will say is he does seem to be he was very glowing talking about Joey Aguilar. And I listened to a little bit of Arian Carter, our starting middle linebacker as well. He's like, yeah, Joey Aguilar, and he has been studying. He's in the playbook. He's going to be ready to go. And we like the energy that he brings.
It's funny?
Positive.
You talk about the tenure that Josh Heupel had, and the last coach that had a long tenure, 5 seasons, was Bud Jones, 2013, 14, 15, 16, and almost 17. So Bud Jones has one less win that Josh Heupel had, and one less game, 51, but 34 wins and 27 losses. And Heupel has 37 wins and 15 losses. So, of course, the average is not that far, but in terms of wins that count, oh boy, there's a difference.
Oh, for sure. And like being able to win in clutch spots, having 2 wins over Alabama, having 2 wins over Florida. And let's be real, this 2025 Tennessee roster is way better than the 2017 roster. Like, I don't see us going 4-8. Now, I don't expect us to go back to the playoffs necessarily, but I don't expect us to go 4-8 either. So, of course, we're going to have plenty of more time to talk about this quarterback competition and whoever ends up being the guy. later on for the Vols. Also, I will say this. I have been playing College Football 26. Got it last Thursday. Very much enjoying the game. Super fluid to play. I will say this. When I've been playing with the Vols, I've actually enjoyed playing with Jake Merklinger more than Joey Aguilar. I don't know if that's just the way I'm playing the game or what, but Merk feels better than Aguilar. But then again, you can't take a video game and replicate that to real life. So, in any case, that's just kind of what I'm seeing.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's the video game is way different than real life.
Exactly. The very last thing I've got is NASCAR. Shane Van Gisbergen won again at Sonoma. This is his third win in like 4 weeks. And he's won the last 3 road course races. I've never quite seen anything like this in NASCAR. He has come in and has just dominated in the road course. And the other NASCAR drivers are going to have to find a way to bridge the gap. Or otherwise, he's going to continue winning all of them. Now, they're going back to ovals this week. I believe they're going to, I think it's not Iowa, but they're going to Dover. That's right. They're going to Dover this week. So, and SVG hasn't been great on ovals, but man, if he ever learns how to be good on ovals, it's going to be over for the rest of these guys. Because man, they can't touch him on a road course. It's quite nuts.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. So in any case, that'll wrap it up for tonight. For Gus's birthday down in Americana, Sao Paulo, Brazil. I'm Nick Hill, live from Chattanooga, Tennessee, United States, and it's a reminder. This episode is dedicated to the Fallen Five that we lost a decade ago today here, Chattanooga. We will always be Chattanooga strong. Have a good night.